I recently watched a debate with William Lane Craig, which I shall link here. The reason I've been addressing statements made by William Lane Craig so often on this channel is that I think he's a good barometer for popular apologetics. Many Christians find him compelling, and I think that there needs to be videos out there showing just how truly flawed his statements are. And despite my opinion that he was utterly trounced in this debate, I think that there was a missed opportunity to show how some of his apologetics result in significant problems for Christianity, because he implicates Christianity in a kind of moral pointlessness that apologists usually daftly try to pin upon atheism. Well, in this case, it backfires. At around 45 minutes into the debate, Craig made the following three statements. Atheists recognize that if you have good reasons to think that God exists, then you have good reasons to think that the suffering in the world is not, in fact, pointless. This all ties in with what Craig calls God's providential plan for human history. Evil is a problem only for a person who has no good reason to believe in God. Now let me stop right there for a moment so that you can wrap your head around that. He's saying that if you believe in God, and if you think you have good reasons for believing in God, then evil is not an issue for you. Don't even worry about it. Why? Because if evil occurs, you can rest assured that it will only end up serving God's plan, which will be for the greater good. So when all is said and done, evil will not be a concern. You see, the premise that pointless suffering exists, or gratuitous evil exists, is extremely controversial. We are simply not in a good position to make these kinds of inductive probability judgments. It's pretty clear that he doesn't realize the implications of the apologetics he's spewing. Time and time again, Craig and apologists like Craig have said that atheists have no basis for which to call something good or evil, even though apologists have failed to give a single real reason why that is so. Yet in this instance, he's saying that nobody, including Christians, can make such judgments. I mean, think about it. If pointless suffering doesn't exist, and if gratuitous evil doesn't exist, then all suffering and evil is being used to fulfill a purpose. And that purpose is part of God's plan, and God's plan is ultimately good. Most Christians will probably agree with that, but notice that within the span of a single sentence, I have devised a way to divinely justify any evil act. Now, according to Craig, we are not in a good position to judge whether or not some suffering and evil today won't lead to some greater good tomorrow. That means, by definition, barring the existence of pointless suffering and gratuitous evil, suffering and evil are, in fact, good. All good. If I were to take your child and torture him to death in front of you, according to Craig, you are not in a good position to say that wasn't for the greater good. You are not in a good position to judge if what I had done was unjustifiable. What's worse, in fact, is that if I actually had tortured a child to death, then according to these popular Christian apologetics, it had to have been for the greater good. And it had to have been justifiable simply by virtue of the fact that I was able to do it. For if it occurred, then it was inherently a part of God's plan. And God's plan is ultimately good. That means, according to these modern Christian apologetics, everything that everyone does can technically be considered good, thereby rendering any notions of Christian morality completely and utterly pointless.